Hello! Today we're going to talk about some of the tools that you will get to use when you start this fantastic hobby of sewing. I'm sure you're familiar with the fabulous fabrics that you get to use. That's the funnest part. But there's all kinds of little gadgets that you're going to need when you get started. Some are absolutely necessary, and some they just kind of make it a little bit easier for you. So let me show you what those are. First of all, you can see that I have a cutting mat. This is a great tool because it goes anywhere. I can put it on any surface and it protects my table when I'm cutting things. Some of them have a pad on it, or you could even put a towel over it and use it to press or iron your fabric. So that's kind of a bonus. But what I like about these little cutting mats is they have numbers around the sides that are marked in inches. So I can lay out a piece of fabric or some ribbon and get a measurement on it without ever getting my measuring tape out. And I can even cut right on this mat. It's very forgiving and it lets me make all kinds of cuts and jabs and mistakes and never bothers my table. So this is a great thing to get started with. When you're ready to cut your fabric, you're going to need either a pair of scissors or a rotary cutter. Now, scissors have been around for an extremely long time. These are special scissors that I only use for sewing. That keeps the blades nice and sharp so they can cut through the fabric and cut thread without any problems at all. I don't ever use them to cut paper because that makes the blade very dull. It's nice to have a special pair of scissors that you only use for sewing. You can cut your fabric out, you cut right around the patterns, you can cut on a straight line using that as a guide. And if you have a pencil, you can even trace around a pattern with your pencil and then cut it out with scissors. So that's the most basic thing that you would want when you start to sew. Sometimes though, you want to cut a lot of fabric at once, and they're all going to be in kind of straight lines. And here's where a rotary cutter comes in handy. Rotary just means round, and this is a round blade. It's very, very sharp. When I press on this lever, it pushes the blade forward. So now the sharp edge is exposed and it has this wheel action. So when I press down on it, it's going to cut right into the fabric, round and round and round. It's a very dangerous tool. That's why it has a safety on it to keep the blade back where it belongs. So if you're new to sewing, I wouldn't use this just yet. Stick to your scissors. The scissors will do everything that the rotary cutter can do. The other thing that you might need when you're sewing is a measuring tape. There's all different kinds, but they usually are just like a ruler. They have inches on one side, centimeters on the other side. The nice thing is, though, unlike a ruler that doesn't bend at all, a measuring tape can go around if you need to measure how big around someone's arm is or their waist. Anything that has a curve to it is very nice to have a measuring tape for. They even make these cute little ones that are so portable. And you pinch it in the middle and it snaps it right back up. I love these. You can put them in your bag or your sewing kit. They don't take up a lot of space and they do just the same job as the bigger measuring tape. And this is wonderful. Even if you don't have a cutting mat, you can use this to measure and mark your fabric and then cut it out. So a measuring tape is a very good thing to have. Now, how are you going to keep all this fabric together? Well, you're probably going to want some pins. There's all different kinds of pins. A lot of them have little fancy decorations on the tops. These are a little bit long for quilting, so that I can take a bigger bite out of my fabric. So if I want to keep a couple of layers together, I can poke it into the fabric and push it up through the top again. And now these two pieces of fabric are stuck together right there. And that could keep it safe while I'm trying to sew it, either by hand or with my sewing machine. Now though, we have clips. If you don't want to use pins, you can use these wonderful little clips that can go right along the edge of your fabric, and that's going to hold it together as well. And they're a lot easier, and they don't poke and cause a problem like the pins do. So you can choose either one that you might like. Now, what are we going to do to keep that fabric together? We're going to need some thread. Most of the time, if you're doing craft projects, you're probably going to use just white thread, and it's a cotton thread. Sometimes you'll see it called mercerized cotton, and that just has to do with how it's wound very tightly and has a little bit of a shine to it, and it's very, very strong. They make it in all kinds of colors though, in case you want to do some top stitching and your stitches are going to show, then that thread is going to show up right against your fabric and make another little design element. So that's really fun. Along with your thread, just in case you make a mistake, you're probably going to want a seam ripper. Now the seam ripper is another tool you have to be really careful with, kind of like the pins and definitely like the scissors, because it's super sharp on this end. You don't ever want to poke it or stab it into your skin or even into your fabric because of how dangerous and sharp that end is. But it's meant to very carefully pick out the stitches if you should make a mistake and want to undo the seam. And if you have to unsew something, this is great because you can just pick out a little bit at a time until you get back to the point where you're ready to go again. And that'll let you separate your fabric. So a seam ripper is great to have too. Now the extra special secret to having a beautiful project come out is just an iron. If you press your fabric every time you do a little sewing of a seam or you turn it inside out and you're pressing it, your project is going to look so professional and you're going to love it. The trick with ironing on projects is that you don't have to go back and forth and back and forth. Sometimes that can wrinkle up your fabric. If I have just some very thin pieces of fabric and I scrub this back and forth, it's kind of moving my fabric around. What's better when you're crafting is to press. Just going to hold down the iron, press it lightly, and then lift straight up. And then you can do that over and over. And that's going to do a whole lot better than if you just run it back and forth and back and forth. So you might want to use an iron. But you know what? You don't have to have an iron, especially if you don't own one, or maybe it's a little more than you want to handle because it's so hot and you don't want to have to worry about burning yourself. You can just use a little tool or even your fingers to press things. You could use the handle on one of your tools and press a crease in the fabric, and that's still going to look really, really nice. So, what are the things that we need as the bare basics of a toolkit? Well, once you've chosen your fabric, choose some thread. You'll need a pair of scissors. I recommend getting a few sewing clips. Definitely want a pencil for marking your patterns, a little measuring tape, and a seam ripper for the oopsies. And really, guys, that's all you need to get started. Even if you're just hand sewing with a needle and thread, you are ready to go with just about any project. What makes this whole thing much easier is a sewing machine.